Thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to, come and learn a little bit more about Arrowsmith School and the Arrowsmith program. This is really exciting. Oh, I'm recognizing some names here. That's wonderful. Uh, yeah. We do have access to not only the chat feature, but also the Q&A feature. Our executive director, Debbie Gilmore, will be fielding questions for us this evening. And, we're going to aim to answer those at the end so we can get through the material that we would like to get through. And then we'll be able to answer the questions at the end. Now, Debbie will may be able to answer some in the Q&A box by typing, or she may pass them to us to answer audibly with our voices. Yeah. There we go. Thank you, Alice. Thanks. I was connecting with a parent who was trying to register, and I think I heard Barbara mention that this might be the first Zoom webinar that we've had, but it's actually, we had one shortly after the start of the work from home as a response.
Oh, all right.
And it was directly related to our working at home options. We had a lot of people from all over the world. I'm noticing the area codes indicate that there are some people who are joining us maybe from south of the border. And I recognize also some of the names, and we have participants from around the world joining us, and that's exciting. Typically, attendees, we normally have these open houses on Wednesday evenings at Arrowsmith School in Toronto. And there was one Wednesday evening, and I was joking around. There were about 20 participants who were in the classroom, and I like to ask, how far had people traveled, thinking that maybe Mississauga or Richmond Hill, which are, just outside the GTA or in the GTA, but on the outskirts, not Toronto proper. And I was surprised when a husband and wife in the very front row said they thought they had won the prize for the longest commute to attend the open house, and they were from Texas, and they had made a point of traveling to Toronto for the open house, and then they're turning around the next day to head home. I'm happy to say that child did end up coming to Toronto for their assessment, and then just due to work, the family was able to pursue an Arrowsmith program for their child in one of the sites that offer the program in the United States. So yeah, that was, and I've heard from the family since, and the son's doing very well. Oh, 7:06, I should start.
All right.
Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. My name is Jason Kinsey, and I am the principal of Arrowsmith School in Toronto. I've been with Arrowsmith School since 2008. I was a cognitive teacher before becoming the principal in 2015. And one of my favorite things to do is in the role of admissions, getting to talk to families every day about how we may be able to help the person at the end of the phone or their child with their learning needs. It is very, very enjoyable to be able to help educate families about the Arrowsmith program and about Arrowsmith School. And we're very lucky tonight because joining us is Barbara Arrowsmith Young, our founder and director of the Arrowsmith program, which you'll know is an assessment process and a suite of cognitive exercises designed to stimulate and strengthen weak areas of cognitive functioning that underlie a range of learning difficulties. Okay. Barbara's vision is that all students struggling with learning will have the opportunity to benefit from cognitive programs utilizing the principles of neuroplasticity, programs that change the brain's capacity to learn, and open to these learners a world of possibilities. So I'm going to be coming back a little bit later to talk more about our specific program options through Arrowsmith School Toronto, but it is my absolute pleasure to turn the screen over to Barbara Arrowsmith Young, our school's founder.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jason. Thanks for the introduction. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending our first virtual open house online. And it's our 40th anniversary open house. 40 years ago, we were not really very computer savvy or having computers, so this would not have been possible. And for me, it's really, when I think back on it, it's a little hard to believe that my journey to find a solution to my learning difficulties began a lot of years ago in 1977, and part of this journey led to the founding of Arrowsmith School in Toronto in 1980. And here we are tonight, 40 years later. So really my life and my work, it has been and it continues to be an exploration of the territory of the human brain and really understanding how it makes us uniquely who we are. And I believe if we can understand this territory, we can have compassionate insight into our functioning and also into the functioning of others. So what have I learned over these 40 years? I'm really truly still humbled and in awe of the complexity of our brains and hence the complexity of the learning process. Science has taught us that our brains have a significant role in shaping who we are. We really can't escape our brains. It's the organ that we carry around in our heads with us everywhere we go. And it has around 100 billion neurons and several hundred trillion connections. And our brain filters our perceptions and our understanding of ourselves, of other people, of our world, and of our relationship to that world. And to me, what's fascinating is that no two brains are exactly alike. So if you think about someone that you know fairly well, and you note that there are a lot of physical differences between the two of you, different eye color, shape of your nose, different height, there are actually more differences between each of your brains than all of your physical differences combined. So simply put, your brain makes you uniquely you, and our brain does shape who we are. So on this journey, I've also learned that we all have our own unique learning profile. If we each think about our own learning process, we can all identify areas where we excel and others where we tend to avoid doing things. Maybe we don't have a good spatial sense and we tend to get lost, or we don't pick up languages very easily, or we miss subtle social cues. And underpinning each of these abilities is our cognitive profile of strengths and areas of challenge. And in most cases, we can work around these challenges and they don't have a significant impact on our lives. A learning difficulty, however, occurs when there's what I call a cognitive load, and a significant number of cognitive weaknesses or difficulties come together to make certain aspects of learning very challenging. I've also learned that there is explanatory value in looking at behavior through what I call a cognitive lens, that understanding an individual's unique profile can help people have insight into their behavior and explain the behavior of others. So what are some examples? There are individuals who are unable to benefit from insight therapy due to a cognitive issue. If you can't connect cause and effect, you can't develop insight into your behavior. And in these cases, this isn't due to psychological reasons such as resisting insight, but a real cognitive challenge that prevents them from this type of understanding. Or stubborn or rigid behavior. It may actually be due to a cognitive difficulty in not being able to see and consider an alternative way of viewing a situation. I had this challenge, and starting in grade 1, I was labeled rigid and stubborn, and throughout my schooling, and it was cognitive, not emotional. And someone who does not follow instructions may not be defiant, but may have an auditory memory problem and can't retain what they've been asked to do. If you're interested, there's a questionnaire on the Arrowsmith website, and you can complete it either for yourself or for someone else or for your child. And based on the responses, it will identify cognitive areas that may be causing some difficulty. And I've also learned that our unique and complex learning profiles are very individual. A researcher at the University of Toronto last year analyzed the learning profiles of 1,452 students who'd completed the Arrowsmith assessment, and he found that 70% of the students had a unique profile shared with no other student. 22% had a pattern shared with 5 or fewer students, and only 8% of the students had a pattern shared by 6 or more students. So our learning profiles are very individual and very unique. I've also learned that there are a myriad of cognitive functions or critical learning capacities that it can impact learning and behaviors. And here's some examples of them. So there's a capacity to read nonverbal cues, which is critical for navigating social interactions, being able to understand why people do things socially through reading their body language, voice tone, to visually memory functions, which are critical for learning to read or spell, executive functions for problem solving, strategizing, planning, critical thinking, the ability to recognize faces, learn motor patterns necessary for writing, auditory memory functions for being able to remember and retain information, understanding number and quantity, which is really critical for being able to budget or to time schedule, being able to grasp relationships, which underlie comprehension, to reason spatially, which is critical to navigate and find one's way around or to read maps. And these are just a subset of all the components that interplay in learning and in the learning process. And I've also learned that the first step in addressing learning difficulties must be the identification for that individual of what their problem is so that we can target and strengthen the critical areas required to make learning easier. For Arrowsmith, the key to addressing an individual's learning problem requires going under the label. So we have to go under the label, such as dyslexia or auditory processing or dyscalculia or dysgraphia, because we have to identify each student's unique profile that is leading to that label or that problem, and then to have the student engage in a cognitive exercise program tailored to address their profile. Each cognitive area requires its own specific exercise to stimulate the underlying function. And I've truly learned there is no one size fits all. And I've learned that there's no cognitive function that is unimportant and that we don't just use 10% of our brains. Over the course of the day, we use all aspects of our brain. If there's an area of difficulty, it will show itself. So let's think of the pilot who had an auditory memory problem, so he couldn't retain all of the instructions from the air traffic controller, or the illustrator who couldn't retain the visual details of objects, so would miss the whiskers on the cat or the buttons on the coat when doing a drawing, or the psychiatrist who had a number problem. She was number blind and she struggled with time scheduling, so she would double book clients. As one parent said many years ago, school is just a metaphor for life. And these problems, if not addressed, will follow us through life. And what's the most important thing I've learned? It's that the hypothesis I posed 40 years ago is still valid. My premise was and remains that it is possible to apply the principles of neuroplasticity through a series of targeted cognitive programs designed to strengthen a range of specific functions. And these functions underlie learning difficulties, and the result, as these are strengthened, is an enhanced ability to learn. There have been over 20 independent research studies, and if people are interested, this is all on our website, and all the studies are there, with over 700 students across 6 universities, 19 different educational institutions in 4 countries. 11 of these studies have been peer-reviewed, 2 have been published, and 5 have had control groups. And research on the significant cognitive changes in students in our 6 to 8 week cognitive intensive program, which Jason will talk about later, is being presented in a couple of weeks in Vienna, online, obviously, at the International Neuropsychological Society Conference. So what are some of the researchers saying that are investigating the outcomes of Arrowsmith? So these are researchers at the University of British Columbia here in Canada. And this is one of the statements, that there's a story here about cognitive efficiency, including working memory and attention and learning, the capacity to learn new things. And that's what I argue Arrowsmith is. We're changing the fundamental capacity to learn new things. These are really important cognitive skills for success at school and life in general. Researchers at the University of Calgary in Canada, after looking at the outcomes, said strengthening cognitive functions presumed to underlie academic achievement deficits improves reading, mathematics, and writing by targeting the cause, the cognitive deficit, rather than the symptoms. And more recently, at Southern Illinois University, the researchers said there is neuroplasticity as a function of Arrowsmith training, which generally improves performance. So do precise Arrowsmith cognitive exercises activate and functionally change particular areas or networks of the brain? The answer is yes. As I posed 40 years ago, Arrowsmith is changing the brain's capacity to learn new things. Change the brain, you change cognitive functioning, and you change learning. So instead of compensating and working around the difficulties, Arrowsmith strengthens the underperforming cognitive functions, and then learning proceeds. It proceeds efficiently, effectively, and actually with joy. So first, change the brain, and what is the brain imaging research showing? These are a number of the changes that are showing, and again on our website, they're talked about in much more detail with interesting diagrams to actually show the changes. So we're seeing changes in brain activation and connectivity. We're seeing more efficient processing, increased activation in the prefrontal cortex and the executive control network, which is critical for strategizing, planning, thinking, setting goals. And we're seeing strengthened network connectivity within and between networks in very critical networks for attention, thinking, planning, memory, and reasoning. And then cognitive changes follow. We change the brain and then cognition follows. And these are studies at 3 different universities which are showing all of these changes. So efficiency of cognitive processing, processing speed, perceptual speed, memory, reasoning, attention, working memory, verbal fluency. So all of these areas are changing. And there's more recent research in Madrid at a university there found improvements in also planning and executive functioning and visual spatial reasoning for these students. And then once we've changed the brain and cognition is changed, academic achievement improves. And these studies showed things like word reading, being able to read words accurately. So word recognition, reading speed, comprehension, spelling, computation and mathematics, conceptual understanding of mathematics, speed of mathematical performance, written expression, speed and accuracy of writing, receptive language, and speed of being able to process and understand academic concepts. And then we've changed the brain, we've changed cognition, we've had changes in academic outcomes. What are the social and emotional and well-being outcomes that the research is uncovering, which are really critical? And we're finding that there's a greater sense of happiness and well-being in students as they go through this program. There's an increased sense of locus of control. These students actually start to feel they have control in their lives. And certainly that was my experience, that I actually had control and I was an agent of change in my life. There's an increase in incremental theory of mind. This is Carol Dweck's work. These students develop an open mindset versus a fixed mindset. There's an increase in adaptability, leadership, social skills, attention, listening well, being focused, and reduction in feelings of depression, anxiety, reduction in hyperactivity. And what's fascinating, they're taking physiological measures, there's actually a reduction in cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which makes sense. If you're feeling better about yourself, more confident, happier, you're going to be less stressed. And we've done research with elementary age students without learning difficulties, and we've seen similar cognitive functioning and academic achievement changes. And as one teacher said, teacher in South Carolina, she said, there's something about Arrowsmith. It makes students excited to try something new. So yes, our brains do shape us. And I argued 40 years ago, if we could harness and utilize the principles of neuroplasticity, we could shape our brains. And I've come full circle from that child who many, many years ago saw no hope in her future. And in fact, my grade 1 teacher basically told my parents not to have high expectations for me. And I've been able to take what I've learned to help others who are struggling just as I was. And the hypothesis I came up with all those years ago was that if we could change a student's brain, we could see changes in critical capacities required for learning. We could see changes in achievement and in well-being. And this has been validated first by experience of 40 years of doing this work and thousands of students that have been through the program, and now by independent research. And my dream is to make this kind of work accessible to all those struggling with learning difficulties. We all have a brain, And I truly believe that through utilizing the principles of neuroplasticity, we can change our reality and transform our futures. So what do I dream of? I dream of a day when school becomes a place where children go to learn and to strengthen their brains. So they can learn with ease and joy, they can learn effectively and efficiently, and they can not only dare to dream, but they can realize their dreams. To me, this is a perfect marriage between neuroscience and education. And this is cognitive enhancement. Everyone can benefit. We can all improve our cognitive functioning no matter where we're starting on that continuum. So thank you for letting me ramble on for the last few minutes. And I now turn the evening over to Jason Kinsey, the principal of Arrowsmith School, who will speak about, I guess, the various programs on offer and what we do practically at Arrowsmith School, both in person and now online. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. I always enjoy getting to hear you speak and the excitement in your voice when you talk about the research that proves what you've always believed. I always get new little tidbits to share when I talk to new families. I have seen a message come up a couple times in the chat. Please rest assured, everybody, that this is being recorded and will be shared afterwards. And I would like to invite everybody to access the Q&A box to ask your questions. Again, Debbie Gilmore, our executive director, is fielding those. She'll be able to respond in kind if it's appropriate. If not, at the end, when it's time for questions, she'll turn them over to us, okay? Now, we have a number of different programs available through Arrowsmith School Toronto, and the first, or the bricks and mortar school, would be our in-person full-time and part-time programs. These programs would be based as the result of the Arrowsmith assessment. The Arrowsmith assessment allows us to create, as Barbara mentioned earlier on, a unique individualized learning profile that helps highlight a student's strengths and their challenges. The Arrowsmith assessment is very important because we use the results of that as our roadmap going forward in programming a student's individualized exercises to be done in the classroom setting. Okay, students who come to Arrowsmith and have an Arrowsmith assessment, they're typically programmed for between 6 and 8 cognitive exercises per day. 6 for school-age students and 8 for high school plus. Okay, now the majority of our students, school age and high school, they also receive 1 period of math and 1 period of English per day. And it's very important to us that students get to continue to hone their skills in these fields, because it's often in English and math where they start to notice changes in their own learning abilities. They're able to do things in English and math that they were not able to do before. Okay, and that's often the very first place where parents will also see changes in their child's abilities as well. Rather than dreading the thought of going to school and engaging in math and in English, students become excited to attend Arrowsmith because they're able to do things that they could not before. Our staff members are dedicated to making a child's involvement at Arrowsmith School feel like that which they would get at a traditional school. Okay, we try and round out the day with mindfulness, with gym, with different activities based on the likes and the needs of the children to make school exciting. And typically our students stay at Arrowsmith anywhere from 3 to 4 years, generally, to address their needs. But our goal from day one is to help a student return to a traditional learning environment as quick as can be. We want them to leave with their toolbox full so that new learning can happen and they can learn without struggle. They'll still have to work, they'll still have to study, but they won't be falling farther and farther behind as they would if they hadn't come to Arrowsmith and accessed the exercise that Barbara created. We do have availability because, unlike most every other private school in Ontario or in the world, we do not want students to be enrolled from kindergarten to grade 12. That's not our focus. We want students to come in, address their needs, and return. So that means that we have about 30% turnover every year, and we have space available for fall 2020. Okay, for the full-time program or the part-time program, the Arrowsmith assessment is required. That's going to be critical to knowing which cognitive functions we need to address with your specific child. Our part-time program is another exciting option. It just so happened that this is our assessment week, year-end assessment. We're doing year-end assessments, and one of our students who has a brother in the full-time program just finished her last assessment in the part-time program. And this student has done the part-time program over the course of the past 3 years. And she is my go-to example when I talk to families about the possibilities of the part-time program, because she had to make Arrowsmith a part of her life. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening from 4 until 6, she would come in and work on one cognitive function a year. She also supplemented that with involvement in our cognitive intensive program in the summer, and I'll get to that in a bit. And the student has made remarkable change across a number of different areas. Now, for the family, it was necessary for the son to come full-time due to his needs. And where the daughter was in school at this time, for her, it was more beneficial for her to access the part-time program. So we do have a variety of part-time and full-time program possibilities that you may wish to consider. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have this year starting an in-person enhancement program. In fact, we have two. One focuses on the cognitive function of symbol relations, and the other is focused on motor symbol sequencing. Now, starting in September 2020, students will have the ability to come in and work for 4 hours per week on one of these cognitive functions. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, it would be possible to sign up for both. All we ask is that a person is able to put forth 4 hours per week per exercise in the classroom under the careful supervision of an Arrowsmith teacher. Okay, this program does not require an Arrowsmith assessment. Next slide, please, sir. Thank you. Our in-person cognitive intensive program. Now, for the past 5 years, we have been lucky enough to have been offering our in-person cognitive intensive program. This generally takes place for 6 weeks in the summer, and it focuses on the symbol relations cognitive function. The cognitive function that's responsible for allowing a person to be able to quickly understand what they read or what they hear. Now, in the land before COVID-19, we would have up to 60 students from all over the world, from the ages of 9 to about adults, and they would work intensively on the symbol relations cognitive exercise. The very first exercise that Barbara Arrowsmith Young created, and in fact, she was the first student to benefit from that. It's a really enjoyable program because it's a shared experience amongst 60 people. Very often we have people come from all over the world, and it's the first time that parents are able to really relax and connect with other parents. If they're not having to worry about rushing off to work in the morning or rush to get at pickup, they're able to connect with other parents who are experiencing similar issue. I was very happy that a couple of years ago, my daughter was lucky enough to partake in the program, and my wife and I noticed significant changes in her abilities to reason, at least with us. My daughter could be a little bit stubborn, but after working on the program, she was certainly able to see mom and dad's side of an argument, or mom and dad's cause for asking her to do things a certain way. This is an accelerated program, and what it does approximately is it condenses the amount of hours a person would spend working on this exercise across a 10-month part-time program school, or 10-month school year part-time program. And that's why we have students working for either 3.5 to 4.5 days in the classroom, again, under the careful supervision of a teacher and a teaching assistant. Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned when I was welcoming participants into this webinar, COVID-19, the situation with that began right before the start of our March break on March 13th. And the Arrowsmith program team and our software developers, they moved heaven and earth to make it so that when our students returned to school on March 30th, March 31st, that they were able to access all of their Arrowsmith program exercises, but from the comfort of their own home. It's been a wonderful 11 weeks, and we have learned a lot, and we continue to learn a lot about what works best in this online learning world. And we are so excited about these possibilities that we are going to be offering in the fall a full-time and part-time on Arrowsmith School online learning option. This would vary from participation in one program per week up to a maximum of 4. And we have, what we envision is that we'll have a morning time slot for people to work with a teacher in a virtual classroom, or an afternoon time slot for students to work with a teacher in a virtual classroom. The assessment would be required for this. And again, as a result of the COVID-19 situation, our team has developed the means to offer the Arrowsmith assessment virtually, online with our psychometrist, so that again, we can get that critical individual learning profile that is going to help educate us as to how we can help your child who's struggling with learning. Next, please, Mark. And then happening right now, actually it started last Monday through Arrowsmith School Toronto, we are able to offer our cognitive intensive program from at home. Okay. Again, this features the powerful symbol relations cognitive exercise. It's the exercise that will help a person to be able to quickly understand what they read and what they hear. You know, a student who has a deficit in symbol relations, they may need something explained to them a number of times before it sinks in. Or more frustratingly, from a parenting standpoint, you can sit down and work with that child on something for an hour and you walk away feeling fairly confident that they understand. And when you come back the next day to pick up where you left off, it's as though everything is gone. So you have to start from square one and reteach the concept that you were trying to teach. So the at-home cognitive intensive program is running over the course of 8 weeks. We felt 8 weeks was more doable for our younger students. And you can see on the slide there that it requires participation in a virtual classroom for either 2.25 hours per day for our younger students, or 3.5 hours per day for our older students. These students right now, they're working in that virtual classroom. They're connected with their teacher. They goal set every evening, and then they gather at the end of the day to, again, talk about their successes. It's gotten off to a really, really great start, and we're keen to continue to enroll people throughout the summer and into the end of 2020. Okay. Next, please. Along with our other offerings, full-time and part-time, we are able to offer the enhancement program. As Barbara mentioned, cognitive enhancement is something that everybody could benefit from. The exercises that we work on, motor symbol sequencing or symbol relations, are 2 of our exercises that most everybody in the world would benefit from. It's an opportunity to sharpen up what you already have. Now, I've talked about symbol relations. Motor symbol sequencing is the cognitive function that's responsible for, helping translate thought into speech, helping translate thought into writing, and would even help smooth eye tracking issues. It forces a person to move their eyes properly across a page from left to right, from top to bottom. And it's an exercise that, again, students do not need to have an assessment for to access, and they're able to do it from the comfort of their own home and have the check-in, not the check-in, they'd be supervised by a teacher in a virtual classroom. Okay, again, starting from September 2020. And then for another exciting program that was born out of the family's needs. So starting in, I think, 2016, we had a family cohort attending Toronto in the summer for our cognitive intensive program. They're very happy with the results that they saw over the course of the 6 weeks. And during the final week, the family met with Barbara, an opportunity to say thank you and hear her talk. And the families in attendance wanted to know what else could they do. And thus was born the Arrowsmith School online remote programs. And it was an opportunity for more independent students, if you will, to take the exercises back home. Motor symbol sequencing again, and symbol relations. Now, rather than working in a virtual classroom with a teacher, these programs are structured that students would be expected to work independently for an hour a day on motor symbol sequencing, 6 days a week, or about 40 minutes a day, 6 days a week on the symbol relations. And then they would have regularly scheduled weekly to bi-weekly check-ins with an Arrowsmith program facilitator through Microsoft Teams. it's during these check-ins that the program facilitator would be able to offer guidance and feedback, and then check to see whether or not a student is ready to move up to the next level of the exercise. There's opportunities for the facilitator to connect with the parents as well to get feedback about how the student is going, and they're able to get the feedback from the families about changes that they're seeing and changes that the child's school is reporting. Right. Now, we do have a lot of programs. Our website is very vast, has a lot of information, and I do hope that I'm able to connect with any of you that have any additional questions about our full-time and part-time on-site or online programs, the enhancement programs. Even if you're interested in Arrowsmith, but you're not quite sure which program would be right for you, I'd love to learn more about what's brought you to Arrowsmith, because it's in learning what's brought you to Arrowsmith. It's in learning where your child may struggle with learning that we'll be able to offer our best recommendations. And then joining us tonight is a parent that I connected with in the fall of 2019. And Stacy here is going to tell you about her journey that brought her son to Arrowsmith starting just this past December. So Stacy, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Forgive me, I had just taken a bite of a snack, and that's when you flagged up my name. Apologies.
That's okay. Thank you for joining us.
No, of course. Hi, everyone. Yes, we enrolled my son in the program. He's 10 years old. Enrolled him in November. We started on December 1st of this year. In the past, we had felt like we had some non-specific concerns. We had pulled him out of public school for grade 1, for first grade, and had put him in a Montessori program, thinking that the independence in a Montessori program might resolve what we weren't sure, issues, delays, or some challenges he had. And as he got older, we realized that he really needed some more structured support, that there might be some real learning disabilities, but we weren't sure what they were. We were encouraged to enroll in our local public school. And so for the first time since kindergarten, we did so this fall. We enrolled in our public school. We had some reporting done. We handed it to the school and met with them to discuss how they could support us. And unfortunately, they let us know that although they were happy to do what they could, that the issues, they didn't feel like they needed to be resolved. He has learning challenges. Well, if you don't know how to spell, good news is you can now use a computer and spell check, things like that. My son had a peer who had started at Arrowsmith this fall, and we were hearing great things about it. So I went and talked to Jason about the program, and did do the assessment, and really found it fascinating that we hadn't heard of this before, and that the actual root of the challenges could not only be worked around, but instead resolved with time and work. It was amazing. So my son joined in person back in the good old days in December. And I think generally has had a positive experience. It is quite a different environment and workday for him than he's had in the past. It is very specific. We spent a little time in the classroom with his main teacher, his primary teacher, and a little time with the English and math teacher in the classroom back, in the winter. I feel like we've actually had more visibility since he's now working from home. But as transitions go, the virtual learning environment, so much of the work that he was doing at school already, besides breaks and socializing, was on a computer. So although it hasn't been a seamless transition, it certainly has not been as hard as it might have been had we been at a different kind of school. Mm-hmm. And it's only been 7 months. So we have not been in the program forever, but I will say that that we have seen a really wonderful improvement to his reading skills, his comprehension, and imagination, and the rest are still in process.
Mhm. Super. Yes, I would agree. What Stacy's talking about, the workload. We set goals every day, every period, and teachers would connect with students about their goals. And I mean, we have teacher tablets that monitor engagement, and students are keenly aware of whether or not they're meeting those goals. It's the from an Arrowsmith standpoint, we use the word master a lot. And in mastery, what that simply tells us is that the work, they plateaued. The work has gotten so easy that it's really no longer a challenge. So we celebrate it because it's usually a pretty big accomplishment, but then we make the work harder. We're always like, there's no resting on laurels. There's no amount of work a child can ever tell me that they've done that's going to make me say, okay, we'll take the rest of the day off. It's like, well, super, let's try and do more, because that's what's going to increase their cognitive capacity. And the way they respond to the goals, I think, is a testament to the exercises as they were created. They're different. You know, they target specific cognitive functions. They're novel. They're unlike any other intervention a student would have been exposed to at a traditional school. And so in doing this different, and then by being able to successfully master the impossible, because students always come across a specific exercise or a specific level that they think they'll never master. They'll never ever, get good enough to move on. And then they do, and they're able to file that away and build on it. I think a happy byproduct of what we do allows our students to become much more resilient. They're very often, we tell them, no, it's not mastery. Go and give it another listen, give it another try. Not quite. Sorry, you're close, but not yet. And they're able to take that and they become much more resilient, and they're able to face challenges head on. It's quite remarkable. 2 months after Stacy's son joined the class, well, actually 1 month, my little boy, he joined Arrowsmith. And my wife and I, we've noticed the exact same thing, where he very often, didn't tell me if this sounds familiar, in the public school system, we would get 2, 3, sometimes 4 messages per week from his teacher on Remind, talking about his inability to kind of follow the rules. We learned that it happened to be during those periods when he was not getting support, the science and social studies, and when he was in with the whole group. He just didn't understand what was going on. And if you don't understand what's going on, you're going to act out. You're going to be out of your seat. You're going to be fooling around. When Jack started at Arrowsmith, those phone calls didn't happen, and not because I'm there either. It's I would go looking for trouble, but he was able to meet the goals that were laid out for him and progress through the exercises that he thought were impossible. My son started in January as a non-reader, and now he's reading. He's not at grade level yet, but he is so much farther along than he would be had we kept him in the public school system. Yeah. Now we do have, so thank you. I was able to look down and I see like there's 17 questions in there. So Debbie's been able to answer some of them. Specifically, somebody asked about hours. For the part-time program, it is 4 hours per week. And generally, these occur on Tuesday and Thursday night from 4 until 6. Although we do have some flexibility, where if there's an opportunity to come in during the day, an hour a day over 4 days, we would be able to do that. The full-time program is like a traditional school. It runs from 8:45 until 3:15. The earliest students can be dropped off is 8:15 in the morning in the backyard. We have somebody on duty in the backyard ready to greet people. And then dismissals at 3:15. We have an extended day program until 6 p.m. During the extended day program, students are able to complete their Arrowsmith homework. And very often they have an opportunity to work on their motor symbol sequencing exercises. a computer exercise if they've been programmed for one, as well as mathletics. A couple years ago, our math teacher lobbied to have us license the mathletics program. It proved to be so popular that students were going home and doing extra math on their own. Very often students can earn, free periods based on their hard work. And our students were choosing to do mathletics during their free period. So it's a really engaging program that is monitored by our mathematics teacher. And again, she kind of unlocks levels that she knows the students would be able to do independently. It's not that experience of a child bringing home unfinished math, not knowing how to do it, and then mom or dad having to sit down and trying to teach a concept. It's not that. It's work that they can do on their own independently. Yes.
Jason, I'll just jump in if you don't mind, and I'll
Sure.
run through some of those questions so you don't have to look through the 19 there.
Okay.
And one of the questions is asking, what does the program look like for students in the summer? Would you like to, and that is also coupled with another question about, is it too late to apply for the cognitive intensive program?
So that one's easy to answer first. No, it's not too late. If you're in North America and you're looking at a September 7th start to the school year, you'd likely be able to enroll up to about July 6th or July 13th. And then that would go until the school begins in the fall. The actual typical day for the student in the cognitive intensive program at home, for school-age students, the day would start at 8:45 with a check-in with their teacher. The teacher would revisit the work that was accomplished the day before, and then kind of let the student know what their goal is for that day. The students would work through till about 12:15. They'd have breaks along the way, like 15-minute breaks here and there, and then they'd work through to 12:15 again when they come together as a class and they'd talk about their accomplishments. Older students, 15 up, they would work from about 8:45 in the morning until about 1:30 in the afternoon, 1:30, 2 o'clock. Okay, again, you'd have, there would be breaks in there as well, but same thing. You'd meet with the teacher, you'd work in the virtual classroom. So that would mean that we use Teams. Microsoft Teams has been our friend, and they would be working on their computer, but they would have their Teams window open so the teacher could continue to monitor. Our tablets that we use to track data, I mean, it speaks in real time how a student is going on their work, but our teachers are able to watch the students as they're working during the day from the comfort of their own home.
Fabulous. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Other question here is, how does a parent determine which program will work for their child?
Right. That is a conversation with myself where I can learn from what's brought you to school. Where does your child struggle with learning? There are a lot of different things to consider, and it's different for every family. I'm happy to speak with you. If there are reports or assessments that you can share with us that round out the picture of who your child is as a learner, that would be great. There may even be an opportunity for us to connect online. I'd be happy to demonstrate some of the exercises to the child or to you, and then we can talk about what the best path forward is.
Thanks, Jason. Another question is around the Arrowsmith School, Toronto, and do we offer extracurriculum programs? Like, for example, sports?
No, unfortunately not sports. We are a small school, but we have a lovely backyard that has its own artificial turf, helps with drainage. Kids get a lot of playtime in the backyard. We do have one period of gym per week. We do the Terry Fox Run, weekly gym. For the past 2 years, one of the exciting new clubs that we've had has been a Lego robotics club, and we've competed successfully in the first Lego League competition. That's been really exciting. That starts close to Thanksgiving, and this year we are having weekly practices through to until January because we made it to the regional championship. We try and offer other activities that students would get in a traditional school, but we're unable to offer like a competitive sports team.
Thanks, Jason. Here's a question around adults. Is there a program to help adults who didn't grow up learning how to touch type?
Yes, we do. I mean, we certainly do have programs for adults. We have a dedicated classroom for adults. In fact, my first year teaching at Arrowsmith School was in the adult classroom. And with respect to the touch typing, there are definitely links that we can send you for practice. Now, there's one exercise, symbol relations, that does require typing. However, it's not an exercise designed to make your typing skills better. And we've created means of checking to see if a person is able to meet mastery criteria without typing at all. Okay, so if you feel as though your typing skills aren't up to snuff, we have a way of making sure that you are progressing at the rate that you should.
Thanks, Jason. There's a couple of assessment questions. So I'll ask the first one. Does the virtual assessment utilize the same assessment tools as the in-person assessment?
Yes, it does. There are a couple of pieces that we're not able to administer. These would be standardized academic tests that are better to be done in person. And then there are 3 cognitive functions: the spatial reasoning, mechanical reasoning, abstract reasoning, where we have not made this available online yet, and though we're looking at the possibility of doing so.
And the next one is, does Arrowsmith accept a neuropsychological evaluation in place of an assessment for the online part-time program? Right.
Unfortunately, no. The Arrowsmith assessment is unique, and it's so unique to us that it is very important that we use our tool to measure the functioning of the 19 different parts of the brain that we believe we can address. A psychological assessment is, again, it's going to help us round out the picture of who a person is as a learner, and I really enjoy reviewing them. And I think what you would find as a parent is that you would find that our report dovetails quite nicely with the psychoeducational assessment. One of our alumni parents often said that the Arrowsmith assessment it's like a user's guide to your kid's brain. It helps you understand why they do the things they do, why they act the way they act, why they struggle the way they struggle. Whereas the neuropsych assessment might be a little bit vague. Okay? It's going to allow you to come up with the label. The Arrowsmith assessment is not a diagnostic tool in that it's not going to label a learning disability as a psychoeducational would from DSM-5. However, it really will help specify how we can help your child improve their learning ability.
Thanks, Jason. There's another question around, well, I'll read the question. So the focus is on students with learning disabilities. Does that also include students that are diagnosed with certain conditions, such as autism, ADD, for example? And there's another question around a student that has autism and is nonverbal.
Okay, again, these are really, really great questions, and I feel it's in having a conversation tomorrow. I think that's really going to help me be able to answer. Now, in my son's case, I can tell you that Jack was diagnosed at the age of 4 as being on the autism spectrum, and though he also has some academic areas where he struggles. So in this case, in fact, I'm sorry, he's of course come into the room. In this case, he's able to benefit from the work that we do. I would want to meet your son who's nonverbal. Now, typically students who are nonverbal may not benefit from the work that we do, although I don't want to dismiss anybody in this forum right tonight. I'd like to be able to meet, although taking small baby steps. And then autism.
Other diagnoses.
It really depends. If again, that's where the conversation and learning all that I can about the student is really going to help me make the best recommendation to you as a family.
Fabulous. This is a question for Barbara.
Mhm.
Are we able to provide any statistics regarding successes or cognitive improvements as a result of the program? And wondering how we measure our performance.
Really good question. So there are a number of different ways that we do this. Each of the cognitive functions, when the student is assessed, there are very specific tests that are looking at each of those functions, and based on the student's performance, they will be rated on a 12-point scale, which is, very finely graded from, in some cases, it might be, above average in functioning, there might be average, they might have mild, moderate, or severe, and variations within that. And as the child goes through the program, or the individual, whether they're 5 years old or 81 years old, they get reevaluated on the assessment. So it's pretty much usually a 10-month program. So 10 months after that initial assessment, if they've been in the program, either the part-time, the full-time program, the enhancement program, well, actually the enhancement program, we don't do the assessment, but any of the other programs where we do an assessment, we will reassess, and we'll look at, based on the student's performance, where they've moved on that scale. So sometimes the student will have moved over that period of time from a severe area of difficulty, maybe to a moderate area. Most students that come into the program, because they have multiple areas of difficulty that we're addressing, is on average somewhere between a 3 to 4 year program. And as I said, we reassess at the end of each year. Sometimes students exceed our expectations, and what we thought might take 3 or 4 years only takes 2 years. Sometimes students take a bit longer. So it's very, very individualized, but everything is measured. And then when the student is working in the program, as Jason mentioned, there's a tablet, all of their data is collected. And we have what we call benchmark expectations that I've built in over looking at data probably over probably 35 years. And so we're measuring also the students' performance on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, based on the expectation of the amount of work they should have done, the accuracy of the work, the speed of the work, and we're evaluating based against those benchmarks as to whether the student is engaged in the way that we've learned they need to be engaged to make the kind of progress that they're making. So everything is incredibly measured. And then over the last many years, we've been doing all of this research to look at changes on very standardized measures. And one of the measures that the researchers use is the Woodcock-Johnson test of cognitive abilities and the test of academic achievement. So on standardized measures, all of that data that I talked about, those are statistically significant changes. So they're changes beyond what is expected over time for these students as they're engaging in the program. We've done research in a publicly funded school system here in Toronto. We looked at students who were identified in the school system and the public system as having learning difficulties. These students were getting academics all day with their difficulties. And what we looked at in the research was their rate of acquisition of academic skills. And what we found was these students were learning 2/3 of a year per year. And this is pretty traditional. If you look at all the research on students with learning difficulties, they're not keeping up with their peers in acquisition of academic skills because of the challenges. So the decision was made to take these students out of academics 50% of their day, and they started doing cognitive exercises for that half day, and the other half day they were doing academics. So now these students are getting less academics. At the end of the year, they were reassessed, and they doubled and tripled their rate of acquisition of academic skills. And again, to me, the argument is you change the cognitive capacity, the academic learning goes forward. It's not for these students sitting in the classroom that is going to benefit. It's changing the cognitive capacity so they can take advantage of that academic exposure. So we're really, really big on measurement and evaluation as students go through the program. Absolutely. So everything, I'm a data freak. So yeah, love numbers. So everything is measured, assessed, tracked. And if we see a student that's, you know, not meeting the expectations as they're moving through, then we go in and we investigate. Like, this is, you know, with respectful curiosity, we go in and investigate, try to understand, is there another area that's interfering? Is there something that's going on? Because we partner with the student and also with the family to ensure that the student is getting the you know, engagement and the amount of work that they require to be able to benefit from this program. And you know, we've certainly, in that investigation, we learn things that then we put into the program to even improve it and refine it. So we're very much a learning organization because there's a lot we do know, and there's a tremendous amount that we don't, and we're still learning. And some of our best teachers are our students.
Thanks, Barbara. There are a number of questions around accessing the program in other areas of the world, and how there's questions from India, from Australia. So what I'd like to suggest to people that have that question is to go onto our website, and under participating schools, you will see the 10 countries where sites are offered around the world, and also which sites offer which sites offer those programs in those countries. And every one of our sites has a contact information there, and please feel free to contact those people. There are also questions about how to access the program online through Arrowsmith School Online. I'd like to suggest that you contact our admissions staff. With the email address is on the screen right now, as well as the telephone number for Toronto. So I just wanted to make sure that people have that information about sites around the world. There's also a question around how the sites around the world interact with Arrowsmith program. Arrowsmith program licenses the program to sites around the world in those countries and sites that I spoke of. And we have a very strong connection with those sites, starting with the training of their teachers. We train all the Arrowsmith teachers around the world. And up until January this year, that was done in person. And as of July this year, it will be done in a remote format. And then we support our teachers around the world. So we have staff that work with teachers, support them in their implementation. They work with them in finding action plans for students. And our staff also monitor the data of those students. And so there is a very good working relationship with sites and Arrowsmith program. And I can tell you from my experience in traveling to those sites around the world that the program that is delivered in those sites is the program that you would see in action in Arrowsmith School in Toronto. In fact, I know some of our participants tonight are educators, Arrowsmith teachers in various parts around the world. So I would, if you are looking for something in your area, please visit participating sites and reach out to those sites. Stacey, there's a question for you, and now I've just got to try and find it again. They wanted someone wanted a example of a before and after scenario with your son.
Before and after. I think I have to again point to the reading. I know all of the exercises. Some of them will address the same issue from different angles. I'm sorry, I'm not as fluent in all of this as everybody else on the call. But what I've seen is the difference in his reading fluency. That before, if he saw a word that he didn't recognize, that he would either skip it, take a guess and move on, or more likely than not, just mumble and try to get through it. And I see a lot less of that. At the very least, if it makes sense from a comprehension standpoint, he's putting in a word that is almost exactly the same. And if not, he's just reading through fluidly where he would never have before. And just to give you an example, we at our home, we've read together some of the Harry Potter books, and the vocabulary in those gets harder as they go. And so I find it remarkable the amount that he is really able to read and understand now compared to before, where I would only require him to read one page in a chapter, and that would take a while. And I'm just not seeing that anymore.
Thanks, Stacey. That's fantastic. There is a question around, no, sorry, I missed that one. Does the summer program target, this one's for you, Jason, does the summer program target the symbol relations cognitive function only? And does this program help everyone no matter what their learning deficit is?
Yes, it's symbol relations cognitive function only. And I believe that, yeah, like symbol relations is an exercise that I believe that everybody could work on and benefit from. Now, it's not a magic pill. It's not a miracle cure. It's a lot of hard work. In the development of the cognitive intensive program, we thought maybe for 30 seconds about calling it Clocks Camp. That's the colloquial name of the exercise. And though it's very, very hard work. It's a wonderful shared experience, but students are tired at the end of the day. And for our international families, we'd recommend maybe that they don't plan on doing a lot of sightseeing or touristy stuff in the evening, because the kids are going to be exhausted. Just the amount of effort that's put forth. Yeah, I think that students who are in my mind, in thinking back over the 60 students that have participated in the cognitive intensive program, I cannot think of one that did not benefit and did not show improvement in that cognitive function.
Thanks, Jason. There's another question. There's a couple around assessment. If people have general questions around assessments, I would encourage you to contact admissions, because they can answer those more specifically. In terms of booking an assessment, that would be really the best place to start. But Jason, this question is around, this person's understanding that children with certain diagnoses or disabilities were excluded from participating in the program, but has that changed? And do you accept all students for an assessment?
Again, that's a really great question. It all comes down to having a conversation. I can't think of many instances where a person might be denied, or we wouldn't have the conversation to see if we would be of some benefit. No, again, give us a call. And or Debbie, did they go into any specifics? Did they name any?
There was yes, the rest of that question was, have any students been assessed and determined to be unsuitable? For example, children with a TBI due to seizure disorders or epilepsy.
No, there have, so in my time as principal, there have been some instances where people have booked an assessment, and then we've had to make the determination that the assessment should be stopped. In all honesty, it's because families haven't disclosed certain, I guess, previous diagnoses to us. I can remember the first time it happened with me as principal, there was a father who wanted his son to be assessed, and his son was on the spectrum. In all the conversation leading up to it, I was led to believe that the son was the high functioning autism, or what would have previously been known as Asperger's syndrome. And when we met, it was very clear that his son was much more severe on the autism spectrum. And We attempted to do the assessment, and though it was very difficult for our psychometrist to have any interaction with the young man. So in all fairness to the family, we made the decision to stop the assessment right then, and no fee was charged. Okay. Yeah, but that's where meeting family beforehand, meeting a child beforehand, connecting over Zoom or Teams would be really beneficial.
Thanks, Jason. There's a question around Arrowsmith School in Toronto and how it is integrated with public school years towards achieving the high school diploma and moving forward to university.
Right. This is a hard question for parents of students who are nearing high school age. So you have to imagine that when a student comes to Arrowsmith and they are the high school age, they're almost taking a gap year. When I was I taught I spent 6 years in the grade 7 to grade 10 age classroom, maybe a little bit older. And I had a young woman. She was with us for grades 9, grade 10, and grade 11. She left grade 12 age appropriate, but she had to start earning her credits from grade 9. Now, it meant that her high school experience was going to be different from mine, was going to be different from her mom's. But high school wasn't the goal for this student. The goal was some type of post-secondary education. And the family, once they were finished with Arrowsmith, they went to a private school for their daughter to earn her high school credits. And she was doing kind of an accelerated program where she was earning, I want to say 4 credits every 10 weeks. And then that opened the door for beyond high school. Right now, we're not in a position to offer credits. So students who come to us would be, again, putting that on hold for a short period of time. The benefit, though, is that when they leave Arrowsmith, they'll have the tools and they'll be able to do things that they weren't able to do before. And they may be able to consider courses that they previously wouldn't have been able to consider. Working with our team as students get ready to transition out, we would connect with families. We would discuss any type of tutoring that may need to take place prior to returning to the public school system. And then we'd even go so far as to go and meet with a student's high school to help make sure that the best courses were selected for that child. I had a student whose local catchment high school wanted to put him in locally developed courses. If you're familiar with high school, you know there's academic, applied, and then locally developed. Locally developed courses were not what this student should be enrolled in. So I took part of an afternoon and went and spoke with them, and we selected the right amount of academic and applied courses playing to the young man's strengths. And he was able to graduate and get that diploma. You're muted, Debbie.
That helps. There are a couple of questions around children with behavioural issues.
Sure.
So are students with behavioural issues accepted as part of the journey to them learning and gaining confidence? And the other part of there's another question around what happens when students have work refusal in online programs. So we've had experience of that over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So you might be able to answer those together. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jason.
I mean, it all comes down to who the child is. Now, in my time as principal and in doing admissions, I remember I met one student. He was high school aged and had the label oppositional defiance disorder. When they came into my office, I was able to show them a couple of the exercises, and he was focused on one and specifically said he would only do it if he could start on level 12. And I could tell mom and dad were rather agitated. Mom ended up taking the son out of the room and just sharing with the dad that it's not that I don't believe that we couldn't help the young man, but it wouldn't be a wise use of their resources if he was going to come in and not attempt to do the work. That's what drives the change. The ability to sit down and to focus and engage for the 30, 35, 40-minute period, what have you. If the behavior is less severe and more like what I was talking about with my son Jack, that was rooted more in not understanding, so he would not really pay attention in what was going on in a class that was over his head. I think very often students come to Arrowsmith and they're around people who understand them. They're around other children who might not have the same profile as them, but certainly they're working on similar things. They're very accepting. Very often in the full-time school year and in the cognitive intensive program, I would be outside out front in the morning, and I would hear from parents that their usual routine is having to drag their child to school and almost like push them through the door, and then the mom or dad runs away. And now the students are keyed up and running down the street to come into our backyard because they're excited to start a new day, because they can achieve their goals. They can exceed them. So it depends on what's driving the behavior. At the very least, and again, in a land before COVID-19, more than happy to have a student come in and spend a half a day with us or a full day with us. They can be set at ease knowing that they're in a caring, comfortable environment, and they're able to do some work and feel successful. The compliance with the work at home, you're absolutely right. It has been a bit of a tricky situation. What we've learned is that our students at home really want to have that connection with the teacher. And that's why it's important for our Arrowsmith online program in the fall to be taking place in a virtual classroom. Because I know we can't reach through the monitor to help, but the child is there and they're being held accountable. As principal, over the course of the past 3 weeks, I've had an engagement competition where I check the tablet every night. I check to see who is meeting their goals, or more importantly, who's spending a full period working to meet their goals. And then on Sunday, I do a goofball draw, and then I send home a gift card in the mail. And that has helped keep some students on point. I think our response to COVID-19 has taught us a lot. And I think that, if this were to come back and if we are learning at home, I think that there are going to be a greater opportunity for students to be under the careful supervision of teachers, for most of the day.
Thanks, Jason. There are a number of questions around fees for the various programs. How could people find that out? That's
having a conversation. Yeah, I know. I think I saw that one of the biggest questions, the cost of the assessment is 2,500 Canadian.
That's for Arrowsmith School Toronto.
Toronto, yes, thank you. Yeah.
And online, Arrowsmith School online, yes. And there's various fees for the various programs. There's a list of those. And if you're interested in that, there's fees for Arrowsmith School Online, and there's fees for Arrowsmith School Toronto. And each of those schools has different fees for full-time, part-time, etc. My suggestion would be you contact admissions, and they'll be able to send you a flyer, an information sheet with those fees included. That's probably the best way to find out those fees right now.
Yeah.
There is a good, sorry, go ahead.
No, otherwise we'd just be shouting out numbers at people. So
yeah, that's what I thought.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
There's a good question here because it's one that we hear a lot, Jason. My daughter is 8 years old and she's very social and her oral skills are outstanding, but she struggles in reading and writing. What can we offer?
Well, I mean, right off the hop, it sounds like your daughter would benefit from at the very least, an Arrowsmith assessment. I can think of a number of different cognitive functions which may be underperforming that are resulting in the difficulties that you see. And then the assessment is going to tell us precisely which cognitive functions are underperforming. And then we can talk about programming options. Your daughter might benefit from being involved in a part-time program or in a full-time program. I did see in the question box that if a child had a large number of cognitive functions underperforming, is it not better to address them in a full-time setting? And I would absolutely agree. I think that being able to address a number of different cognitive functions comprehensively in a full-time program would allow a person the opportunity to move through the program much more quickly.
Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
There is a question around, Barbara's will answer this one, about giving a real life example of an exercise, Barbara.
Okay, I realized that we should have put a slide in as one I use in presentations, and I think Jason does. But if we think about reading, and somebody just talked about reading, there's part of the brain, we call it symbol recognition. One researcher calls it the brain's letterbox. Another researcher calls it the visual word form area. So if you imagine like thinking of the word cat, closing your eyes and sort of visualizing it, this is the capacity to hold visual symbol patterns, which is critical for learning how to read and how to spell. So this is a student that, you know, they might see the word on the page once, they sound it out, and the next time they see it, they have to sound it out again because they don't recognize it and remember it from the previous sighting. And actually, I just zoomed into a class in Brisbane, Australia last night, and one of the students was talking about her improvements in this area. She was working on this area, and then she actually read a fairy tale to us, which was pretty amazing given that she couldn't read before. So to the exercise. So we have about 44 different languages that are programmed into a computer program. And we start from very simple languages. There's one called Miao. I think it comes from some part of China. And then, you know, from Telugu, Sinhalese, Burmese, all sorts of different symbol patterns. And sometimes people will ask, you know, my child is struggling with English, so why are you giving them Sinhalese or Burmese or Telugu? And the idea is, for all the exercises, we don't want the student to be able to compensate. So if we were using English, they might be able to put meaning to it, or they might be able to put sounds to it. So they'd be using other cognitive functions to compensate and support the area of difficulty. So one of the principles of the exercises is to take away the supports and the compensations and target as much as we can that function. So the student will be looking at the computer screen, and they'll be looking at a simple set of symbols that they're totally unfamiliar with, and they have to go through a whole process of being able to hold those symbols in their mind's eye. So there's a whole visualization process they go through, and you know, they work away, you know, with a couple of symbols all the way through the symbol set, and eventually they get to being able to hold 8 Chinese characters in their mind's eye. And at that point, English actually looks pretty easy. But the idea is we're not teaching skills, we're not teaching content, we're changing the brain's capacity, in this case, to hold and retain visual symbol patterns. And what we see, you know, in our work as the student goes through that, and I think probably Jason, maybe your son was doing that exercise, is they start to be able to read. And again, it's not because we're teaching them how to read, but we're changing the brain's capacity to recognize and remember and retain symbols. So that's one example, but the principle of all the exercises is identify the function that you're going to target, try to understand the nature of that function, try to find an exercise or an activity that will work that function without the supports of other areas. So it's very targeted, almost kind of like a laser targeted approach to a specific area. And then, as Jason talked about before, mastery is built into all the exercises. So as soon as a student masters a level, you know, again, we congratulate everybody in the classroom, claps, the computer screen, if they're working on computers, bursts into fireworks. And then we make it a little more difficult because, you know, we need to increase the cognitive complexity to drive neuroplastic change. It's one of the fundamental principles. So that's, you know, one area. And what we see, not only does reading improve as we work on that exercise, obviously spelling, because the student can now recognize symbol patterns for spelling, but even things like math equations or chemical equations, any kind of visual template, memory learning improves, because it's kind of that, you know, photographic visual memory for symbol patterns if they get, you know, to an exceptional level in that ability. So that's an example. And then I just talked about sort of the basic principles.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, so yes, Jack did that exercise, and one of the standardized academic tests that we do determined it. So Jack was assessed in December, determined that Jack was at the first month of kindergarten when it comes to word recognition skills. maybe he knew his alphabet. It was very low. We retested him in just last week, and he now is able to recognize words that you'd expect somebody in grade 4 to recognize.
Wow.
And that was, I mean, I think that's a kind of a rare case where he's spent only since January working on the exercise at school and here at home, but that type of profound impact. Now he can read my phone when I'm sending a text. He can read the TV. So yeah, he's getting better.
That's fantastic. There's a couple of questions around our sites around the world. I'll ask this one, Jason. I completed the online questionnaire on behalf of my 13-year-old son, and it revealed 11 areas of cognitive weakness. Like a previous questioner, my son is also very social and articulate. We're in Australia. Can you outline the best options for us? Our nearest school is over 100 kilometers away.
I think now the good news is that there are going to be schools down under that are going to be offering the at-home version of the Arrowsmith program. So that 100 kilometers is negligible. In fact, I think I saw an educator from Australia here.
There are a couple with us who are offering the program right now.
Yeah. So you'll go on the participating site section of our website, or I believe the Arrowsmith program online has its own section on our website, and you'll be able to find a provider close to you in Australia.
That's correct. There's been a question around, would the schools in other countries offer the same full-time benefits that Arrowsmith School Canada would? Barbara, would you like to answer that one?
Good question.
Sorry, I just got distracted. Can you ask me the question
yes.
again? I was just reading something in a chat box. Sorry.
Yeah. Would the schools in other countries offer the same full-time benefits that Arrowsmith School Canada would?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, all of the teachers are trained. They're all, working with the students on the programs, all the same benchmarks. We do ongoing professional development. We support the teachers if they have any questions. Absolutely, and we track all of the data. All of the students, no matter where they are in the world, are getting the same program if they're working in a program site that's offering Arrowsmith. That absolutely, that is the case.
Thank you. This is, I'm not certain who's going to answer this from our team, but will the recording of this webinar be available for someone who is unable to participate in this webinar?
Yes, we just got the thumbs up. It will be available.
For someone that's not in this group, Mark?
Yep.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, and again, I'm not certain who would like to answer this one. How does this approach compare to other learning programs, such as Linda Mood Bell, and does this help math skills in addition to reading?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Okay. Absolutely, yes to math skills. We have a series of programs that work on different aspects of numeracy. So there's what we call quantification sense. So that's having kind of a sense of number, quantity of number. So there's a whole separate program for that if the student needs that. This is a student that can't really learn their math facts. You teach them, but they don't have the capacity to retain them. I don't know how many parents we've talked to that spent the whole summer teaching the math facts, and then the student steps into school in the fall here in North America and doesn't remember them, and that's that capacity. We have a program for understanding sequences in mathematics. That's a different program. The cognitive capacity we have for the symbol relations is really critical for conceptual grasp of math, and that's what we saw, the changes in quantitative concepts. That was a difficulty I had. My father was a mathematician and a physicist. He tried to teach me math for all of my schooling, and I could never understand. After I did the symbol relations exercise, I went back and taught myself all of mathematics from grade 1 right up to college level and understood it conceptually from first principles. So depending on where the math challenge is, and that's what the assessment will tell us, we will address that function. And in some cases, it can be multiple areas that an individual is having difficulty with. So that is the math piece. In terms of Linda Mood Bell, I mean, there are a number of good programs out there that teach what I would call content or skills. So there's Orton Gillingham, which is a great program for reading and spelling patterns. Linda Mood Bell, again, very good for learning reading and spelling. So I call them kind of content programs. So they're really teaching a skill or teaching content. And we all need to learn skills. We need to learn how to read and how to spell, but I don't believe they're addressing the underlying cognitive functions. So if a student has a difficulty in multiple areas that are all related to reading, so visual memory that I talked about, Broca's speech pronunciation, which is the phonemic aspect of reading, lexical memory, which is sound symbol, or no, sorry, is kind of associative memory, auditory speech discrimination, which is, holding the speech sounds. So if students have difficulty in those range of areas, no matter how much you apply different reading programs, they're going to struggle. What we argue is you strengthen those underlying cognitive functions, and then they can benefit from programs like Orton Gillingham, Linda Mood Bell. There's phonographics. There are all sorts of different kinds of reading programs like that. The idea is strengthen the capacity, which then allows the learning to go forward with ease and efficiency.
Thanks, Barbara. Jason, there's a couple of rapid fire questions particular to Arrowsmith School, Toronto.
Okay.
So the first one is, what training and educational background do the teachers have?
Sure, our teachers are Ontario certified teachers. That means that they've been through a formal teacher education program, either in the province of Ontario or recognized by the Ontario College of Teachers. And then on top of that, we also go through a intensive teacher training program at Arrowsmith. It's hard. It exposes those areas that you've struggled with, and we've likely been able to compensate for. And though it also is an opportunity to learn how to properly teach the Arrowsmith program methodology. It's unlike being a teacher, because when you get into teaching, your natural instinct is to do whatever is necessary to help the light bulb go off. At Arrowsmith, the students have to do all of the hard work. If you really cannot have any level of scaffolding or hand-holding or guiding them to the right answer, because then they're not going to gain the benefit. I think during my teacher training cohort, the comparison was, I wouldn't get any benefit if I had any of the participants run on the treadmill for me. So it's learning how to support the children, learning how to make sure the exercises are being done properly, and then we receive ongoing PD from our wonderful Arrowsmith program team, and we work together to help the students be as successful as they can be.
Thanks, Jason. Another one specific to the school. How does the part-time program coordinate with the full-time public school program?
With that, generally, I mean, the part-time program will generally run after, from 4 o'clock until 6 o'clock. Am I answering the right question, Debbie?
Yes.
And then, so really there's no intermixing. Although, I mean, we would certainly be happy to connect with our partners in the public school system so that we can talk about what we're doing, and we can help educate the child's, regular teachers during the day, where to look for changes, and how best to help support that child in the classroom as they start this journey. If there are opportunities, again, where I think we would have to work in concert, if a child is able to come in and work with us during the day, it might come down to scheduling. We've had other students from other part-time school, other private schools who would be able to attend in the afternoon with us. But again, it all comes down to a conversation and then seeing how best to support every child.
Thanks, Jason. There's a couple of questions around difficulties that people have and how the program can help. One being reading comprehension, and another working memory issues. Who would like to answer that?
Do you want me to go ahead,
Sure.
Jason, and then you can jump in if you want? So reading comprehension, absolutely. And again, depends on what cognitive functions are leading to the challenge with reading comprehension. This is where I talked about we have to go under the label to identify the cognitive functions. So symbol relations, which we do in our part-time program, in our remote program, in our cognitive intensive program, in our full-time program, and it's the area that I had. Absolutely impacts comprehension because you can't make connections between things. So you struggle with understanding, you know, what you read. You actually struggle with understanding what people say to you. So that absolutely impacts comprehension. Memory can actually impact comprehension because if the person isn't retaining the information, they can't comprehend. In some cases, comprehension can be impacted because so much energy is put into the actual mechanical aspect of reading that there's no energy left over to comprehend. In other cases, there's executive functioning, where the person just kind of glosses over the information, picks up kind of a general sense, but doesn't really understand at a deep level, you know, of what's the essence or the main point. So again, if there's reading comprehension, we go under that to understand what are the components for that individual that are leading to the comprehension problem, and then we address those. So, and then working memory. I actually talk about working memory in my book because I kind of have a little bit of an issue with working memory. I believe that what working memory is every single part of your brain has an aspect of working memory. It's just really the ability, can you hold and process and work on information? So in some cases, it may be a numerical working memory. In other cases, it might be a semantic or meaning working memory. So again, we need to identify for that student what is interfering with that working memory and address that. Certainly in one of the slides that I showed in the research, the outcome research, we're absolutely seeing on standardized measures working memory changes because we change the holding capacity of the different cognitive functions, which then they can hold more information to work on. We change auditory memory, we change visual memory. You know, semantic memory, we change a lot of memories as a result of the different cognitive exercises.
Thanks, Barbara. This is a question maybe for Mark. Will there be a link on our website to this webinar? And also I'm wondering, Mark, if it's possible for people that are interested around those fees, perhaps when we send this link out, or maybe we can send those information sheets. It was just a question for people that have those inquiries.
That's a great question. So no, I don't think we'll have a link on the website to the webinar, but you will be getting an email with a link to the website. So you're more than welcome to send that out. And that's a great point. I'll mention it to Alice as well. Maybe we can add some short information around fees. We have a little chart, makes it a little easier to navigate what the fees are.
Yeah, that's great. That might be easier for people to get that information. Jason, this one, there's a couple of questions around how the online program works, specifically around time zones, check-ins. How does the online program work?
Right. I mean, and what families will have to understand is that you know, the nuts and bolts are still being decided, and that's where, again, you going to our participating site section of the website and finding a partner closer to you will, I think, make all the difference in the world. Because you're right, like we will be here in Toronto, and we'd likely have a morning session, afternoon session, perhaps even an evening session. But for a family who is on the other side of the world, it would make more sense to be connecting with a teacher working in that virtual classroom in a time zone closer to you. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah. If the student is independent and you feel that it's more of a motor symbol sequencing or a symbol relations deficit, then by all means, our remote program, I think, lends itself to, it's not spending a full day in a classroom. It's a one check-in once a week or once every 2 weeks for about 30 to 45, 50 minutes. So that might be worth considering as well.
Thanks, Jason. I'm not certain if this applies for the in-person school or the online school. How many children attend the school at one time? Are children grouped into grades or ability? Just trying to get a sense of the learning environment.
Right. So at Arrowsmith School in Toronto, we have space for about 70 students. And you know, in the past, we've had 4 classrooms, or what we would have called divisions. And they would range from like Division 1 would, so the second, they'd be grouped based on an age range. So Division 1, grades 1 to 5. Division 2, grades 6 to 8. Division 3, grades 9 to 12, and then our adults. Okay. And then that's a really good question. I do also want to say that when it comes to their math and their English classes that they attend, they'd be grouped based on ability in that regard. And that way they're working on kind of the same material in a small group, rather than in a large public school classroom with 30 kids where you have a wide range of abilities and the teacher's expected to do, you know, a meaningful English lesson to all of them in a 40-minute period.
Great. This question, Barbara, you might like to answer this one. Is or has the Arrowsmith program worked with any boards of education at provincial levels to get this program included within the public school systems so that this much needed program can be accessed by the masses of kids in need?
Great question. And for 20 plus years, we were in the Toronto Catholic District School Board here in Toronto, which is a publicly funded school board. And I think a couple of years ago, sadly, one of the programs that gets first cut when there are, you know, trying to save money are programs for students with learning difficulties or special needs. So sadly, after all that time and a number of research studies that have been done to show the benefit, we were basically cut as a result of funding cuts to the board. But certainly our vision and mission is to make this available in publicly funded systems. We're in a school in Auckland in New Zealand that is a publicly funded system. And the program has been there for a number of years. In Sydney, in Australia, we're in kind of a hybrid. Debbie can speak maybe a little bit to that. It's the Catholic Education Office that is, you know, partially private and partially public. Debbie, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yes, in Australia, there is a Catholic system that is 85% funded by federal and state governments, and parents have a fee to pay as well. And Sydney Catholic Schools has been offering the Arrowsmith program for this is its 7th year, and so they have incorporated it into their system of schools as well. And there's a public school in Auckland and a public school in Adelaide in Australia that have also incorporated Arrowsmith into their school. And you'll find the Auckland school and the Sydney Catholic schools on our participating sites on our website. Another question here, is executive function addressed? Sorry, Barbara, had you finished your
yes,
answer?
I have.
Right.
I have, yes.
Is executive function addressed directly or indirectly, like reading comprehension? Are there any studies which looked at measuring improvements in executive function? Barbara, maybe that's one for you.
Sure. So it is addressed, I mean, I don't know whether directly or indirectly. I mean, we have a program that I believe is working on the prefrontal cortex in the left hemisphere, which is definitely critical in executive functioning, thinking, problem, planning, solving. Problem solving, planning and problem solving. I'm just a little tired. And we see absolute changes in that capacity from students that are very passive, easily distracted because it also regulates attention, to being able to actively plan, strategize, set goals, do all the steps to reach those goals. There's, you know, this document, you can't really see it. It was in one of my slides. There's the Arrowsmith Program Research Summary 2019, which covers the research looking at cognitive changes, all of the changes I talked to. If you click on if you go into the document and click on the name of the university doing the study, it'll actually take you right into the study, and it will show in some cases that they are looking at executive functioning. There was a study done in Madrid, in Spain, at a university there with students in, I think it was grade 3, and they saw planning abilities and executive functioning change. We're seeing the brain networks, both in the UBC research and the Southern Illinois University research, that are related to executive control, absolutely changing. We're seeing more activation in the prefrontal cortex as students go through the program, which is related to executive functioning. So absolutely, our work addresses very significantly executive functioning.
Thanks, Barbara. This is a question for Mark. Is there any government funding available?
Not direct government funding, but there are some medical tax credits that may be available depending on your circumstances. So we have a link on the website. I'll put it up in the chat in a minute as well, that helps you try to navigate that field a little bit. We've had quite a few parents have some good success with that. So it's certainly something to look into and see if it applies to your situation.
Fabulous. Thanks, Mark. There is also a question in the chat around how can a parent get Arrowsmith program to partner with their child's existing school, or is this even an option? Up on the screen right now, you'll see Tara Bonner's email for licensing information. My suggestion would be, if anyone had this question, please contact Tara. Tara is, who used to be the principal at Arrowsmith School, Toronto actually, is very happy to speak with parents, advocates, and educational organisations who are interested in offering Arrowsmith program. So please email Tara and she will set up a time to chat with you. And I think one of our last questions here, do we follow Orton Gillingham?
I'm happy to answer that. I was trained when I was in graduate school in Norton Gillingham. I think it's an excellent reading program. That was in the early 1980s. I'm not sure, we have Orton Gillingham at the school. We actually have London Mood Bell. We have phonographics. We have a range of reading programs. I'm not really sure which reading programs our English teacher uses, Mr. Ian Taylor Wright. So certainly I think it's an excellent program. I'm just not sure whether it's the one that he is using with the students, and we use whatever we think is going to best suit the needs of our students. So he's not on here tonight, so I don't know exactly which one or ones he is using.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm just flicking through Mark, you've been monitoring the chat. Is there anything that's not answered here, because we don't have any more questions in our Q&A box?
Yeah, there was one here that I thought was interesting for Barbara. Someone was saying, just to clarify, you attain mastery through repetition, aside from what has already been mentioned. I think there's a little bit more nuance to that. So
yeah. So mastery, there's a series of criteria that a student has to achieve to attain mastery, and definitely, they have to do a repeated number of trials. But for every exercise, there are performance criteria. So there's accuracy, which they have to attain 90% or better in accuracy, because the idea is before we make something more difficult, we want to make sure that that cognitive function is really holding at that level before we step up the challenge. So 90% or better in terms of accuracy, and initially some students say, but 50% is a pass, but not where your brain is concerned. So it's 90% accuracy, and then it has to be automatic. So if it's taking the student 3 minutes to do something that really should take 10 seconds, they need to meet that automaticity criteria, and it's different depending on what the exercise or activity is. And then they have to do it consistently. So if they do that once, that's wonderful and we celebrate it, but they have to do it for a number of trials. So it's basically accuracy, automaticity, and consistency. And then they master and they move up to the next level of the activity to then drive further neuroplastic change, because now there's an increased cognitive load and cognitive complexity.
Thanks, Barbara. And Jason, for you, I think you touched on it, but maybe you could talk about it a little bit more. The idea that if they sign up for the fall online program, does it interfere with a normal school day, or is it more of a homeschool kind of setting?
That's a good,
There are
yes.
different options I think you can probably step into.
Yes, there are certainly different options. It depends on where you are in the world. You know, you would have to imagine that we would be working traditional school day, you know, like 8:30 to about 3:15. How we envision students being able to access a max of 4 exercises in the morning, a max of 4 exercises in the afternoon. And though if your child's enrolled in a regular school, there would be, I believe, a possibility to access this work kind of as a dedicated after school program, where again, you would meet likely one period per day over the course of 4 or 5 days. And then, yeah, just be working in that virtual classroom. I think it would lends itself, I think we've had conversations, Mark, lends itself to people who are on that homeschooling track. And though I believe that as a part-time program, this is a really exciting opportunity for people who don't live in the GTA and are interested in helping improve their children's ability to learn. Debbie, you're muted.
Sorry, you think I would learn that by now. And the last question of the evening is for Barbara, and then we'll go back to you, Jason. Have you tracked the % of retention in the students that have gone through the program at various timelines, 3, 5, 10 years after being in the program, to see if their functioning has remained consistent or has it deteriorated?
Yeah, so we track students out of the program. I mean, myself, 40 plus years out of the program, students 30 years out of the program, 25, 20, all the way up to 1 year out of the program. And what we see is there is not a drop off of function. And I believe, you know, we use the analogy that the brain is like a muscle, but it isn't exactly like a muscle, because we know if we stop going to the gym, our muscles atrophy, and I can attest to that. But what I believe happens with this work, and we're seeing this now in some of the imaging research, which I really encourage people to look at it at the website, on the website, is that, you know, there's, I like to use my hands. Like if you think about, you know, your neural network is up here functioning really, really well. And then you have some functions that are down here that are underconnected or weak in the, you know, in terms of their strength. They're acting as a drag on the neural network, right? They're, you know, what we're seeing is the areas in the brain that are functioning well are having to hyperconnect and overcompensate to try to do the job of these weak areas, but they can't because they're not designed to do that. And we're seeing this research both in students with learning difficulties and in individuals with traumatic brain injury. And what we're seeing as students go through this program, in both cases, is these underconnected areas start to strengthen in their connectivity. And what I believe then happens is they start to engage in that neural network. And so once they're functioning well, we don't need to continue to do the exercise because they're starting to get their own exercise by being engaged and working within that neural network. That's what I theorize, and certainly practically what we see is once the function is there, it, you know, continues to be there, and the individual just starts to use that function in their everyday activities and in their life. And I mean, I certainly know in my case, other than, you know, I'm getting a little older at this point, and so I'm actually going to go back and just, you know, top up a little bit in that symbol relations just to keep my brain, you know, sharp as I'm aging. And that's a whole nother application for this work is, you know, that kind of slight cognitive loss as somebody ages. But we are not seeing drop off of function, and that to me is really exciting. And what we're also seeing, you know, we've worked with a number of individuals that are very creative, songwriters, jazz pianists, visual artists, and what they talk about is as these functions come up, it frees energy for the creative process because these other areas aren't having to spend energy to support the areas of challenge or difficulty. And now that they're engaged, there's more cognitive capacity and more cognitive energy to devote to the creative process. I believe there's a link on the website of a visual artist who's in Europe talking about that. There's another visual artist, Shannon, if people want to find her on our website, that's also a lawyer, and she talks about, you know, the change in her ability to do her art as a result of going through actually the cognitive intensive program, the symbol relations. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to that question, but we do not see drop-off of function.
Debbie, muted.
Over to you, Jason. That's the last of our questions.
Yeah, sorry, there's one just popped up about the online program 2 hours after school. What if your child has a hard time focusing? It's a good question. And I think, though, the nature of the exercises, again, are different from what a child would normally be exposed to in the classroom. And there are different motivating features in our computer exercises, and then just in the being able to do the work. Students are programmed for just outside their comfort zone so that it does force them to work up that mental sweat, but it's also achievable. And then, you know, nothing breeds success like success. And I think that once a student's able to be successful on the exercise, they'll keep going. My guess is that if you do have a child who has attention issues, there are likely 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 things that can hold their attention for hours. And knowing that they have an active role in making learning easier, then that might be what that child needs to stay engaged. And then our teachers are really good at learning about how to help motivate the children. And finally, I just would like to thank everybody for attending this evening. I mean, we started off with we still have 33 people here, and it is nearly 9 o'clock. So thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you for your interest in Arrowsmith School and the Arrowsmith program. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And I know that I really hope that Tara and I are going to start being able to have conversations with you tomorrow. We are here. We've covered a lot of material. We've talked about a lot of different options for you or your child, and we'd be happy to revisit those with you tomorrow and help come up with the best plan going forward. At Arrowsmith School, I mean, I think it's a piece of artwork that happens to sit on Barbara's desk that, you know, the majority of the world thinks that learning difficulties, learning disabilities are there for life. And the fact of the matter is, we believe that they're not, that we can help remove them and that we can make learning easier, and students can go back to school and learn without struggle. So thank you for coming tonight. You're going to be getting follow-up emails from me. You'll get a copy of the video, and then an opportunity to connect with us at hopefully tomorrow. All right.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Jason. Thank you for doing, you know, such a stellar job and steering the Arrowsmith ship through these very uncertain times. I just have to give a little shout out to Jason. Debbie and I were actually in Australia when the borders to Canada closed and had to come home. And we came home, you know, to everything already in process to delivering this program online. So thank you for your school leadership and your passion and commitment and your dedication to this work. So I just want to acknowledge you and thank you.
It's a good team to be a part of. And I mean, thank you, Debbie, for fielding questions, Mark for answering questions and being the ever-present tech support that we all need. Our marketing director, Alice Ross, has had to step away, as well as our parent attendee tonight, Stacy. She had to, you know, move on to family commitment, but thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful. Okay. All right, no more questions. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.